They're not even there. They took off.
Good morning. I'm Bruce Alberts, the President of the National Academy of Sciences. And it's with great pleasure that I welcome President Clinton, Vice President Gore, distinguished members of Congress, and all others of you here today. This building that you're in is not only the home of the National Academy of Sciences, it's also the home of two other academies, the National Academy of Engineering and the Institute of Medicine. These three academies together jointly oversee an entity called the National Research Council, which is our operating arm. This is a major science policy organization that publishes nearly one report every working day. Most of the reports are written at the request of the government, and they deal with matters of science policy or general policy that involve science and technology in some way. And more, as everybody recognizes, many policy issues involve science and technology today. To illustrate the range of the work we do, we prepared in 1996 the first ever national science education standards for the United States. And I should add that that was at the request of the governors in Charlottesville in 1989, then chaired by Governor Clinton. At the other extreme, one of our volunteer committees prepared a report dealing with how one should take care of the plutonium, dispose of it, that's coming out of the many nuclear weapons being dismantled around the world. And this quickly became official government policy. We are a private organization, and as such, all our work is done independently of the government, and the results that the government pays for are provided both to the government and to the public at the same time. Anyone in the world can read what we do. Our advice is up on the web for free. We're trying to get every one of our reports, the full text of all of those, up on the web as a permanent knowledge resource for the nation and the world. Well, that's enough about the academies. Let me just say it's very appropriate that I introduce Vice President Gore today here at the Academy. He's, of course, a distinguished leader. He needs no introduction, but some of you may not know the breadth of his knowledge about science and technology and the consistent leadership that he has shown in these areas for more than 20 years. He was the chair of an important committee in the House of Representatives in 1981, and as such, he organized the first ever hearing on global warming, that is, on global climate change. And at that time, the Washington Post wrote that the greenhouse effect was something for the, quote, sandals and granola crowd, unquote. So he's been a visionary. As another example, As another example, Senator Gore pointed out the great ethical and legal implications of advances in DNA technologies. In fact, this is my field. I'm a molecular biologist. He did this long before these implications were noticed by anyone outside of the scientific community. In fact, sooner than most of us in the scientific community recognized it. The Vice President has a deep understanding of the organization of scientific and engineering research in our nation. It's a very complicated system involving government, universities, industry, and he has been a strong and consistent supporter of this vital enterprise. Last but not least, he has a sophisticated grasp of the need to support a broad range of the scientists, different kinds of sciences, so that they could interact synergistically to enhance our nation's health, security, and environment. Albert Gore has been a frequent visitor to the Academy. It is an honor for me to present to you the Vice President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I didn't know I was going to get that kind of build up, Bruce. Thank you. I do come over here a lot, and I appreciate all the kind words. And Dr. Alberts, I want to thank you and all of your staff and your team here for all of the help that you've given to the President and me, and to the administration and to the Congress, and for the role that you play in our country. It's a great pleasure to be here with so many distinguished guests, and on behalf of the President, I'd like to spend just a moment acknowledging the folks who are on stage with us here. Before I do that, I want you to know that there are several members of the President's Cabinet who are present here today, including the OMB Director, Jack Lew, who plays such a prominent role in this issue, and of course, John Koskinen, who is Chair of the President's Council on Year 2000 Conversion, and we want to thank John for all the work that he's done on this, having been a part of the effort to persuade him to come back out of retirement and take this on. I want to really lay it on thick because he's really, he's done a great job. Why don't you stand up, John? We appreciate what you're doing. Also, let me point out that the Secretary of Labor, Alexis Herman, is here, and the Acting Secretary of Energy, Betsy Moeller, is here, and Deputy Secretary of Labor, Kitty Higgins, and Deputy Secretary of Transportation, Mort Downey, Deputy at SBA, Fred Hochberg, also FCC Commissioner Michael Powell, and others in the administration. Janet Abrams is the Executive Director of the Year 2000 Council, Morley Winograd with the Partnership for Reinventing Government. And from the, I probably should have started with the members of the Senate and the House. I want to say a special word of acknowledgement to Senator Bob Bennett and his partner, Senator Chris Dodd. The two of them are leading the charge on the Senate side to create a very thoughtful bipartisan forum for addressing this issue that faces our country and the world. And on the House side, I want to especially acknowledge Congressman Steve Horn of California, and Congressman Dennis Kucinich of Ohio, Congressman John LaFalce of New York, and Congressman Jim Turner of Texas. Now, behind me here on stage are some distinguished Americans who are hard at work on this issue, and the President will be referring to some of them, but I want to acknowledge Earl Nye, the CEO of Texas Utilities Corporation, Stephen Wolf, CEO and Chairman of the U.S. Airways Group, John Pasqua, Vice President for Y2K at ATT, Peter Turner, who is the COO at Torrington Research Company, and Sandra Wells, who is in charge of Y2K for Torrington, and Ed Brown, who is Vice President for Internet Services with First Union Bank. Now, I took note, Dr. Alberts, of your comments about me and technology, and I was recalling a magazine article, one of these airline magazines, and they had a list a few years ago of 31 signs that technology has taken over your life. I'll just read a few of them. If you know your email address but not your Social Security number. If you rotate your screensaver more than your tires. If you have never sat through a movie without having at least one device on your body beep or buzz. Now, here's the point of it. My personal favorite was number 23. If Al Gore strikes you as an intriguing fellow. But I don't understand that. Why is that? But technology is, without question, a vital part of our everyday lives, and we constantly face the challenge of making sure that we're on top of it and mastering it instead of letting it take control of our lives and master us. And we're here today to discuss what we all need to do to ensure that technology continues to be a path to prosperity and not a source of new problems, especially on the day when the calendar turns on the year 2000. I'm speaking, of course, about the so-called year 2000 problem, which, as everybody knows, well, unfortunately, not everybody does know it, but as many people know, and certainly everyone in this auditorium knows, it could cause serious problems for commerce and communications all over the world if we're not serious about fixing it. This is a story of conscious decisions by people years ago that led to completely unintended consequences. Back in the 1960s and 70s, managers and programmers tried to save money by saving on memory. At that stage of the computer revolution, memory was at a premium, and they were trying to avoid using any unnecessary space in the memory storage areas, and so they came up with the notion of representing the date with only 2 digits instead of 4. So 1965 became just 65. And it saved millions of dollars, but it also created one whale of a problem. The software assumed that every year began with 19, and it wasn't programmed to read the year 2000. The programmers assumed, of course, that the early versions of software that they were using would quickly become obsolete, so they really didn't think about it that much. But software turned out to be a different kind of technology from toasters or cars. When you get a new version, you don't just throw away the old software, or at least you don't, when you develop a new version, they didn't throw away the earlier versions. They built upon it and added to it. And software began to evolve in ways that are not completely dissimilar to the evolution of life forms, in the sense that the new forms recapitulated some of the earlier evolutionary steps. And without spending much time considering it, the software writers continue to think, well, we'll soon replace this, and if we fix the numbers, well, they'll have to go back and fix it all over the place. And so they fell into a pattern of denial, and it didn't really seem to them to be a problem. But as a result, the flawed programs were replicated by each successive generation, and over time they built up, and today we have hundreds of millions of computers and devices and tens of billions of embedded chips that will not accurately read, many of which will not accurately read the year 2000. When you have that many of them, if only a small percentage of them don't accurately read the date, then the world has a problem. And unless the old lines of code are fixed, the problems, of course, will be serious. And that means that if somebody gets a bill in December '99 and doesn't send a check until January of 2000, if that company's computer isn't fixed, it might not register your payment because it will think the check is from 1900. And that would be the least of the problems. So it has to be fixed. And this is a challenge that exists on 4 different levels. First of all, it's a challenge to the federal government. With more than 7,000 mission-critical systems at the federal level, carrying out functions ranging from Social Security payments to air traffic control, it is critical that our electronic systems run effectively and efficiently. Secondly, it's a challenge to state and local governments. States use computers to run vital public health and safety systems, from Medicaid to unemployment insurance to water treatment plants. Third, it's a special challenge to the private sector. Virtually every American business, both large and small, has a stake in our information economy and ultimately has to take personal responsibility for fixing their own systems. The people who are with us on stage today, to whom I referred earlier, have taken a special leadership role on this issue, and we want to hold them up as examples, and they're working with us to solve the problem, and private businesses are really doing a wonderful job in most cases. We'll talk about some of the others. Now, fourth, it's an international challenge. In a world with hundreds of different languages, the way in which our computers speak to one another across national boundaries drives our markets, our jobs, and our future. The President will talk more broadly about all 4 of these areas in just a moment. Let me take just 1 minute to focus on the federal role. The federal government has been working very hard to ensure that our critical computer systems will in fact run smoothly when the date changes. Earlier this year, the President established the President's Council on the year 2000 conversion and appointed John Koskinen, the highly respected former Deputy Director of Management at OMB, to head up this effort. Along with John, I've met with the President's Management Council to make clear that their #1 job was to meet this challenge. And I joined in the Cabinet meeting when the President laid down the law and went to each Cabinet department and set in motion efforts to make sure that every Cabinet member understands this is priority #1. And today, over 30 executive branch, independent, and regulatory agencies have representatives on that council, and great progress is being made. At the Social Security Administration, for example, more than 90% of critical systems are already year 2000 compliant. There are areas where extra attention is being devoted, I assure you. And we know very well that we have serious work ahead of us, and we have to remain diligent. Our goal is to have 100% government-wide compliance, not by December 31, 1999, but by March of next year. And John Koskinen really is a tireless and talented manager with a stellar record, and I know that together we will continue to make good progress toward meeting that goal. And we want to thank our colleagues in the legislative branch of government for approaching it with the seriousness of purpose and dedication that they have brought to this task. This can be a model of partnership, and in fact, one of the lessons businesses are learning is that some of the instincts for conflict or to take advantage of some competitors' problems have to be submerged into a common effort to make sure that everybody in a particular industry sector is solving the problem, because it'll affect everybody if that's not solved. And the same thing is true where the federal government is concerned. Our Office of Personnel Management is currently working to make sure that every agency has the talent and the personnel needed to address this issue. Last March, OPM issued a memorandum that will enable us to bring back retired government programmers to meet this challenge without requiring them to give up their retirement benefits. After all, much of the work that needs to be done involves computer languages that were in vogue 30 years ago, but are not as prevalent today. And some of these languages even have dialects that can throw you for a loop if you haven't been conversant in them personally. And these programmers have the training and the skills that are greatly needed right now. So we're doing our part, and part of the message today is that everybody has to do his or her part. Let me be clear about one thing in closing. The year 2000 problem is a management challenge and a programming challenge. It must not be a political football. We need bipartisan cooperation to solve the year 2000 problem, not political rhetoric. More than anything else, the year 2000 problem has revealed how interconnected and interdependent we have become. As software has evolved, so has our society. We're all in this together, and we must solve it together. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no person who understands that better than President Bill Clinton. Over the past 5.5 years, no person has worked harder or done more to give our families and communities the tools that they need to make technology work for them and to make it a pathway to a brighter future. And of course, we see the results in all of the great economic news in most parts of our country. 16 million new jobs, new records for small business creation every year now, 78% of America's schools wired to the internet, and the biggest increase in education opportunity in a generation. The President is here today to talk about how the United States of America can keep this progress going and continue to address the year 2000 problem today. It is my great honor to present to you, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, Dr. Alberts, to all of our platform guests, and Senator Bennett, Senator Dodd, Congressman Horn, Kucinich, LaFalce, and Turner, to the members of the administration who are here, and all the rest of you who are committed to dealing with this challenge. This is one of those days that I never thought would ever arrive, where Al Gore has to listen to me give a speech about computers. Being president has its moments. And I have to ask your indulgence, because this is my only opportunity to appear before the press today, and I need to make a brief comment about something that is also of importance to all of you, and that is the agreement that was reached yesterday between Russia and the International Monetary Fund to stabilize the Russian economy. I think all of us understand that a stable and democratic and prosperous Russia is critical to our long-term national interests. Ever since the fall of communism there has been a strong bipartisan consensus in our national government, and I believe in our country, to working toward that end. The commitments that Russia made in connection with yesterday's agreements will substantially advance economic reform and stability there. Now it is critical that those commitments be implemented to strengthen confidence in their economy. It is clear, I think, to all of us now that our prosperity here at home in America is deeply affected by the economic conditions elsewhere in the world. About a third of our economic expansion that the Vice President referred to, which has given us 16 million new jobs and the lowest unemployment rate in 28 years, with the lowest inflation rate in 32 years, has come from our exports and our economic relations with the rest of the world. We therefore have a clear interest in playing a leading role to advance freedom and prosperity and stability. One of the most cost-effective ways of doing that is through the International Monetary Fund, the world's financial firefighters. For the first time in 20 years now, the IMF has had to draw on special emergency reserves to underwrite this Russian financial package because its resources were stretched dangerously thin due to the financial difficulties throughout Asia, principally. To protect our economic strength, therefore, it is imperative that Congress act now to promote global economic stability by paying in America's share to the IMF. Earlier this year, the Senate, in an overwhelming bipartisan vote, endorsed legislation to strengthen the IMF and to pay our fair share into it. Since then, the legislation has languished in the House. If we fail to act responsibly at a time when there is so much financial uncertainty in the world, we will be putting our farmers, our workers, and our businesses at risk. This is a time to put progress ahead of partisanship, and I ask Congress to proceed to do so. Thank you. Let me also say at the outset, I want to say a special word of thanks, as the Vice President did, to John Koskinen and his whole team for the work they are doing, and to all the people that are working with them. We have just on this platform represented people from the utilities, from transportation, from finance, from telecommunications, and from small business. And this really is a joint effort we are all making. But I thank you, John. Before I became president, John Koskinen was a personal friend of mine. I doubt if he still is now that I got him to do this. But What's a friendship to save the country's wires? So I thank you. I asked Bruce Alberts, I thought I remembered that Richard Burke's magnificent statue of Albert Einstein is right outside here, and I wish we could bring him to life for this moment. But I think I'll drive by it on the way out for inspiration. It seems unbelievable, but it's only 535 days from now, at the stroke of midnight, when we will usher in a new year, a new century, a new millennium. It will be, to be sure, an astonishing age of possibility, of remarkable advances in science and technology, a time when information clearly will widen the circle of opportunity to more people in the world than ever before, and when technology will continue to shrink our small planet and require us to deal with challenges together, including that climate change challenge that Dr. Albert referred to. It is fitting, if more than a little ironic, that this same stroke of midnight will pose a sharp and signal test of whether we have prepared ourselves for the challenges of the information age. The Vice President discussed the design flaw in millions of the world's computers that will mean they will be unable to recognize the year 2000. And if they can't, then we will see a series of shutdowns, inaccurate data, faulty calculations. Because the difficulty is as far-flung as the billions of microchips that run everything from farm equipment to VCRs, this is not a challenge that is susceptible to a single government program or an easy fix. It is a complex test that requires us all to work together. Every government agency, every university, every hospital, every business, large and small. I came here today because I wanted to stress the urgency of the challenge to people who are not in this room. So often one of the wry and amusing aspects of the nature of my work is that when I give a speech like this, I am typically preaching to the choir, as we say back home. But hopefully the sermon is heard beyond the four walls of this room. Because clearly, we must set forth what the government is doing, what business is doing, but also what all of us have yet to do to meet this challenge together. And there is still a pressing need for action. The consequences of the millennium bug, if not addressed, could simply be a rash of annoyances like being unable to use a credit card at the supermarket, or the video store losing track of the tape you have already returned. Does that ever happen to you? It really is aggravating. It could affect electric power. I just wanted to remind you that I used to have a life, and I know about things like that. It could affect electric power, phone service, air travel, major governmental service. As the Vice President said, we're not just talking about computer networks, but billions of embedded chips built into everyday products. And it's worth remembering that the typical family home today has more computer power in it than the entire MIT campus had 20 years ago. An oil drilling rig alone may include 10,000 separate chips. The solution, unfortunately, is massive, painstaking, and labor-intensive. It will take a lot of time to rewrite lines of computer code in existing systems, to buy new ones, or put in place backup plans so that essential business and government services are not interrupted. With millions of hours needed to rewrite billions of lines of code in hundreds of thousands of interdependent organizations, this is clearly one of the most complex management challenges in history. Consider just one major bank, Chase Manhattan. It must work through 200 million lines of code, check 70,000 desktop computers, check 1,000 software packages from 600 separate software vendors. The government's Healthcare Financing Administration, known affectionately by the governors and others as HCFA, which runs Medicare, processes almost 1 billion transactions a year its computer vendors must painstakingly renovate 42 million lines of computer code. All told, the worldwide cost will run into the tens, perhaps the hundreds of billions of dollars. And that's the cost of fixing the problem, not the cost if something actually goes wrong. Already, extraordinary efforts are underway by the people on the platform, many of you out here and others, but more must be done. We know first we have to put our own house in order to make certain the government will be able to continue to guard our borders, guide air traffic, send out Social Security and Medicare checks, and fulfill our other duties. We've worked hard to be ready. I set a government-wide goal of full compliance by March of 1999. John Koskinen is heading our council on the Y2K problem. I've met with the cabinet and charged them personally to produce results and to report quarterly to OMB on progress. We're working with state and local governments to do the same thing. We have made progress. As has already been said, the Social Security Administration has more than 90% of its critical systems ready. Other agencies like EPA, FEMA, and the VA are well on their way to meeting our goals. But not every agency is as far along as it should be. I have made it clear to every member of my cabinet that the American people have a right to expect uninterrupted service from government, and I expect them to deliver. I want to thank the thousands of individuals who are working to prepare our government and to make sure we can stay open for business. I especially want to thank the Vice President and John Koskinen and the people who are working with them at OMB and elsewhere. And I very much appreciate these members of Congress who are here and the extraordinary bipartisan interest and support meeting this challenge has engendered. In my proposed balanced budget for 1999, I asked Congress to fund this initiative on a one-time basis because it is literally a once-in-a-lifetime challenge. I urge the Congress to fully fund it and to provide contingency funding so that we can respond to unforeseen difficulties that are sure to arise as we near January of 2000. We have worked closely with Senators Bennett and Dodd and Congressman Horn and Congressman Kucinich and the other members who are here, Congressman LaFaltz and Turner and others in the Congress. As I said, there has been a heartening amount of interest in this by people who actually know quite a lot about it in the Congress, and that's a very good thing. I think we all understand that this is a case where we cannot allow, even in this election season, any shred of partisanship to impinge on the national interest. We, after all, only have 17 months to go. I believe we also have a role to play in helping to meet this challenge around the world. Surely we can't be responsible for the preparedness of other countries, but I can make the same argument I just made about the IMF and Russia. If increasingly our prosperity is tied to the well-being of other nations, it would obviously have adverse consequences for us here at home if a number of our trading partners had major malfunctions. When I was meeting with the world's major industrial organizations in Birmingham, England, a few months ago, I brought this up, and I found that we had become far more invested in this and involved in this than some other major nations. When I was in Santiago, Chile at the Summit of the Americas, I brought it up in our private meeting, and a number of countries had literally only begun just to think about the problem. So I think it is important that the United States recognize that the more we can do to help other countries meet this challenge in a timely fashion, the better off our own economy is going to be, and the more smoothly our own businesses will be able to function as we pass over into the new millennium. The United States, to try to help, will provide $12 million to support the World Bank's Year 2000 Fund for developing countries. I also want to say what we all know and what you can see from the platform, which is that it's not a government problem alone. By far the most significant potential risks fall in the private sector. Large firms already have spent hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure their systems are ready. Many have spearheaded remarkable efforts to make sure their firms and their whole industries are ready. We're encouraged that dozens of firms and thousands of people on Wall Street last night began a simulation to test whether they are ready. And the telecommunications, banking, electric power, and airline industries all deserve praise for the seriousness with which they are taking the challenge. I want to compliment one person back here in particular. Steve Wolf came all the way back from Africa, got here at 3 o'clock in the morning to show up to manifest his understanding of the importance of this challenge to the airline industry. And he is still breathing the rarefied air of Kilimanjaro. So we thank him especially for doing that. But let me say, in spite of all this progress in the business sector, just as in the government sector, there are still gaping holes. Far too many businesses, especially small and medium-sized firms, will not be ready unless they begin to act. A recent Wells Fargo Bank survey shows that of the small businesses that even know about the problem, roughly half intend to do nothing about it. Now, this is not one of the summer movies where you can close your eyes during the scary parts. Every business of every size, with eyes wide open, must face the future and act. So today I would issue 3 challenges to our business community. First, every business must take responsibility for making sure it is ready. Any business that approaches the new year armed only with a bottle of champagne and a noisemaker is likely to have a very big hangover on New Year's morning. Every business should assess its exposure, ask vendors and suppliers to be ready as well, and develop contingency plans as we are, in case critical systems or systems of vendors fail as we move into the year 2000. I want to especially thank Aida Alvarez and the Small Business Administration and its supporters in Congress, and I thank you, Mr. LaFalce, in particular, for the work that has been done to spread the message in the small business community. And I'd like to salute one firm represented here, the Torrington Research Company, which makes fans for cars and computers. It has only 55 employees, but they've taken the time to check their systems, and by the end of this year, they will be ready. By the end of this year, I want every small business in America to follow their lead. Now, thank you. As the Vice President said, we need literally an army of programmers and information technology experts to finish the task. Many of the computers involved are decades old. Some of them use programming language no longer used or even taught. There is a wealth of knowledge in America's tens of thousands of retirees who once worked in the computer industry or government as programmers or information technology managers. I'm pleased to announce that the Department of Labor will expand its job bank and talent bank to help to meet this challenge. And I thank Secretary Herman and Deputy Secretary Higgins for that. The AARP has also agreed to help out, and we're reaching out to civilian and military retirees who did this work for government before. I will ask these older Americans to set aside their well-earned rest and help our nation to meet this challenge. Second, businesses should exchange and pool information among themselves. It makes no sense for every firm to have to reinvent the digital wheel. Businesses should be able to benefit from the experiences of other firms in the same situations that have found solutions or identified new obstacles. Today, too many businesses are understandably reluctant to share information, fearing legal complications. We have to take prudent steps to clear away any legal barriers to effective action. Earlier this month, the Justice Department stated that competitors who merely share information on how to solve this problem are not in violation of the nation's antitrust laws. We need to get that message out there loud and clear. No one should be afraid to help another company to deal with this challenge. There is more we can do. This week I will propose Good Samaritan legislation to guarantee that businesses which share information about their readiness with the public or with each other and do it honestly and carefully cannot be held liable for the exchange of that information if it turns out to be inaccurate. And here too, time is of the essence. Our third challenge to business is that you should take responsibility to accurately and fully tell your customers how you're doing and what you are doing. By letting customers know they are on top of the problem, businesses can help to maintain confidence and avoid overreaction. This is very important. It is important that we act and not be in denial. It is also very important that we avoid overreaction from people who hear, oh my goodness, this problem is out there. And so we have to do both things. The proposed Good Samaritan law will give companies the confidence they need to ensure that they keep their customers informed. If ordinary citizens believe they're being told the full story, they'll be far less likely to act in ways that could themselves hurt our economy. We can do more to help businesses reach these goals. Later this month, our Council on the Year 2000 Conversion will launch a national campaign for Year 2000 solutions to promote partnerships between industry groups and government agencies with the goal of sharing information about what actually works and to prod organizations at every level to get ready. Making certain government services are not interrupted, minimizing disruption to commerce, encouraging businesses to share with each other, and report honestly to customers. And above all, every business in America taking responsibility for being a part of the solution in the year 2000 conversion. These are the ways we, the American people, can be prepared to meet this challenge. Now, no one will ever find every embedded microchip, every line of code that needs to be rewritten. But if companies, agencies, and organizations are ready, if they understand the threat and have backup plans, then we will meet this challenge. You know, the Millennium Bug is a vivid and powerful reminder of the ways that we are growing ever more independent as we rise to the challenges of this new era. When our founding fathers urged us to form a more perfect union, I don't think they had this in mind, but they might be quite pleased. The powerful forces of change that have created unimagined abundance also bear within them, as is consistent with human nature, the possibilities of new and unexpected challenges. But if we act properly, we won't look back on this as a headache, sort of the last failed challenge of the 20th century. It will be the first challenge of the 21st century successfully met. That is the American way, and together we can do it. Thank you very much.